Thank you very much. Look, I welcome this bill as a pro-jobs bill, and includes a host of smart measures that will make Ireland stand out against its competitors and give us an advantage over those with whom we go head-to-head in foreign investment terms. If this bill and the government's very welcome jobs plan announced this week is about reorientating Ireland's economy and refocusing it as an entrepreneurial economy, I think that the next budget should be about broadening out the burden of recovery and growth. However, I do want to say this, and I want to say this very clearly. It would be wrong and ill-conceived at this stage, at this sensitive time in our recovery, to excessively tax work. The fact that we as a government have previously restored the national minimum wage to a decent rate, and we've moved in this bill to take 330,000 people, working people, out of the clutches of the universal social charge, is, I think, a fair reflection of the wide view in government that we need to ensure that we have a floor of decency in this country, beneath which nobody is allowed to fall, and that work should be rewarded and encouraged and not disincentivised. The bill does introduce about 1,000 million euros worth of new tax measures, and all the evidence says that there is likely to be an increase in tax take over the next few years, from 36 billion in 2012 to over 43 billion in 2015. However, based on these figures, it's anticipated that taxation as a percentage of GDP will remain fairly constant at around 35% of gross domestic product. In any person's language, these figures show that taxation in Ireland is low by international standards, and is anticipated that it is likely to remain low based on those figures. But I think importantly what these figures tell us is this: there is room to make our taxation system fairer. There is room to make our taxation system much more progressive than has hitherto been the case. Morally and ethically, those who have the most should make the largest contribution. Key public services, as we're all aware, our schools, our colleges, our hospitals, and Garda Síochána, they don't run themselves. But can I say too, at this juncture, it amuses and confuses me in equal measure when I hear some deputies, some government deputies indeed, challenging ministers, as has been the case in recent weeks, for example, about adjustments to community employment schemes, as if the tough decisions that are taken across government departments are being made in some sort of politically and fiscally neutral environment. They're not. I think it's trite too, on the one hand, to decry the sort of changes that we've had to preside over this year, whilst at the same time simply refusing, in some instances, to countenance any bold or meaningful changes that might impinge on the assets of or the vast taxpayer subsidised reliefs enjoyed by some of the very well off in this country, who, the last time I looked, were doing quite a good enough job looking after themselves. We can ask, and we should ask, more of those who have the most to give. And this government needs to grapple with this question as part of our financial recovery and as part of our fairness agenda. And I can completely accept, and I want to put this on the record, that the Minister for Finance decided to leave income tax alone this year for good reason. There's a strong and compelling case to do so at this very sensitive time in our recovery, particularly for those who are on low and middle incomes. The last thing I think as well that the Irish Main Street needs is an assault on the modest pay packets of some of our less well-off citizens. However, I firmly believe that we are fast approaching a stage where new ways of raising revenue, requiring the better off to play a much greater role in our recovery, has to be devised. Further progressive changes to capital taxation rates and exemptions, for example, could yield several hundred million euros for the Exchequer. Changes to a standard rating of pension tax breaks could raise possibly over 400 million euro too. Other reforms of pension tax law, which were alluded to by many interest groups in advance of the budget, could also have the potential to raise several hundred million euros. So in these times, I think more than ever, boldness and imagination is required to help get the country on the right road. None of us can say, I think, on the one hand, let's protect the services on which we all depend, and then on the other hand refuse to engage at all in the notion that there's a better and a fairer way of raising money to do the things that I think it's fair to say we all want to see happen. I think we need to have an honest and reasoned debate on where the heavy lifting should be done and on whose shoulders it's most responsible to place that responsibility. Could I say as well, I think we've long since moved past the stage where budget announcements have been and should be protected like the third secret of Fatima. It's incumbent on us as an open, transforming and reforming government to facilitate a genuine national debate on our economic direction and what sort of society we want to see emerge from the mess we inherited from the previous government. Presenting the budget here in this House is a fait accompli, and all of the set pieces from government and the staged outrage, in some cases, from the opposition that goes with the annual budget carnival, I think is an anachronism and frankly belongs in the past. This form of government has no place has no place in a modern parliamentary democracy. And an opening up of the budget system would, to allow for genuine engagement with the opposition, and indeed backbench government TDs, to engage constructively, I think, at a much earlier stage in the process than has previously been the case. And I know that there are supporters of this concept at senior level in government in both Fine Gael and the Labour Party, and I look forward to developments in that regard shortly. In fact, I listened very intently to Deputy Stanley's contribution earlier on, and I'm afraid, as always, from Deputy Stanley's party, all we hear is empty rhetoric and no real workable solutions for the crisis in which we find ourselves. The contributions from the Sinn Féin party are always heavy on analysis, so I'll give you that, but are deficient in real solutions. I think a new and open approach to the budgetary process will expose the fact, as I say it, that the Sinn Féin emperor indeed has no clothes when it comes to the real budgetary process in this country, whether they accept that or not. There is, as I said earlier, I think much in this bill that we can be proud of, and that this government can be proud of. The new measures for those who bought their homes between 2004 and 2008 are very welcome indeed. The change to the domicile levy, removing the citizenship requirement, is very welcomed. This is an element of our taxation policy that needed reform, that has received an amount of reform, and I think it is scandalous that last year that only €1.5 million was raised this way. While the new measures contained in the bill are to be welcomed, I think in terms of the yield it's probably too early to say what we can anticipate might be generated from that, but I think it's important that we keep a very close eye on that. And finally, in conclusion, can I say, Cathaoirleach, in my own constituency of Louth, the provisions in the bill designed to assist the revenue commissioners to clamp down on the activities of illegal fuel laundering will be welcomed by legitimate forecourt operators who are frankly hemorrhaging business as a result of criminally inspired fuel rackets that are particularly pronounced in the border area. This is costing jobs. It's costing millions of euros to the hard-pressed exchequer in lost revenue, and it's causing environmental havoc, much to the cost of Louth County Council and other local authorities across the country. I'm pleased to see that the legislation supports the work of the revenue, the excellent work of the revenue, operating a very hostile environment in many cases, in their work to crack down on the laundering trade, which, as I said, is costing jobs and wreaking environmental havoc.
Thank you, Deputy.